Good morning, members. It's Sunday Seedling Day, and so today what we're going to do is we're going to start doing some repotting of some seedlings that have been growing for a few years now. And these are new hybrids of both bilbergias and alcantarias, which are now ready to pot on into their individual pots and continue the growing process. Now, the alcantarias, they're big feeders, so on top of the potting mix that they get that already contains nutrients, I'm also going to add a couple of little pellets just of power feed just to give them a boost and get them growing nice and strong, so we end up with nice, strong, healthy new hybrids. So this particular variety was planted way back in 2020 in December. So they're already, 2.5 year old to reach this size that you're looking at now. So you can imagine how long it takes to produce a brand new hybrid. Now, not only do we have to do a lot of culling and getting rid of ones that don't grow appropriately to what we want them to, especially when it comes to plants like bilbergias. So these bilbergia grex, which are both the same, so a grex are your seeds that you plant. So all of this has come from this same planting that I did back in November of 21. So again, they are over 18 months old now, ready to be plugged into community pots. So they get transferred into these squat pots. These are 110 ml squat pots. They're Bromeliad pots, so they've got lots of holes for drainage purposes, and they're nice little squat pots, so they make really good community pots. So we transplant our little plugs, we unplug them. Now, they've already been plugged at this stage, so they've already had some work done to them from the time they originally came out of their seedling houses, which they were put into when they first were seeds. Then they were separated into these plugs, and then the next step is into a community pot the following year, and then another 12 months time these will then be divided up again into individual ones, and we'll discard the ones that don't that aren't appropriate. So there's a lot of culling. So at the end of the day, although I may have several hundred little seedlings here, at the end of the day, I may end up with only 5 or 6 out of that entire grex that reach maturity, and I end up keeping and waiting for them to flower, reproduce, and then get photographed and get registered. So it's a very long process for those of us that do hybridizing, and in this country we really should be appreciated for the work that is done. Now, the potting mix that I use when I am doing these transplanting, this is a mix that contains perlite, propagation vermiculite, which is very fine, and it also contains high grow hydroponic seedling or seed raising mix as well, used for seedlings and for cuttings. That's all mixed together, 2 parts of the peat mix to 1 part of the perlite and vermiculite, and I have a big tray filled up here ready to do the potting. Let's just move over to one of the other greenhouses and just see how they progress. So just before I enter the greenhouse, there's a plant here that's in flower. It's a bilbergia. And what I can do, or what you can do, is you can separate the pollen, because this one here hasn't been pollinated yet. You can take the pollen off this one and use it on another one. You can save the pollen, freeze the pollen, and use it later on as a cross. Or you can self-pollinate this back. Now, it's a hybrid, which means it has got several different plants in its background genes. So by making a self back on itself, pollinating it, so me actually moving the pollen up onto the female receptive part here, by doing that I am pollinating this plant, and then hopefully in time it'll produce seed. Now, the seed from this one will not be the parent, will not match the parent, but it will have traits of the parentage of the plant in the background. So it'll be a completely new hybrid that is produced. Now, in a few weeks' time, around 6 or so weeks' time, be able to see swollen buds down the bottom of this plant, and that's where the seeds are. And when they're ripe, then they're able to be collected. Now, this needs to stay dry during this process after it's been pollinated, and we've got a storm coming. So I'll need to take this plant and pop it in to a protected area so that that pollen doesn't wash off the stigmas on the top. Right. So that plant has just been selfed and hopefully will produce seed. Now, when we get the seed, we then plant it into a cocoa peat fibre, and we then wait for the seeds to grow. And then about a year later, we can then start that process of transplanting. So after a year has passed, we can then pluck out individual or little clumps of seedlings that have grown. In this case, these ones are Alcantarias. Now, these ones again have been growing here for another 12 months. The seed mix that they're in has got no further nutrients in it, and so they need to be potted again. And so the process begins all over again. And we keep doing that with all of our different hybrids. And the same with the Alcantarias, the Neoregelias. More Neoregelias are all due now in winter to be potted out into new mix to give them new nutrients so that they can grow healthy again. All right, so that's the next step after a further year of the seedlings. Once they start to reach this height, this is where we can start plucking them out. So these ones here are bilbergias that are a couple of year old. They can now get put into individual pots and grow into something along the lines of what you're seeing now further in the background. They grow quite quickly. In another year's time, you'll end up with a plant that's flowering. So for a bilbergia, the amount of time it takes is approximately 3 or 4 years from the time we put the seed down until we have a flowering plant. Once we've got a flowering plant, we need to ensure it remains stable. So its pups need to be the same as the parent, and as is the case with all of these, then they can be given a name and taken photos of and going through the registration process. So it is quite a few steps involved in doing hybridization for those of you that are interested in doing it. But the end result is some beautiful brand new plants that have not been around. The idea is we're looking to make something very unique. Something like that, for example, is a new hybrid that has been registered and named. It's a beautiful plant, and it's something that was the aim was to get that really pink sort of coloration. So very happy with that one. So that's the aim. Now, when it comes to Neoregelias, these are all Neoregelia babies that were planted now coming on to over 12 months. There are some variegated ones amongst our collection here. These are all Neil Bain's last babies to be planted. So there are some variegation plants here. But not only that, there are some quite nice wide-leafed ones. This is an Eva hybrid. So there's some quite nice different ones. It's not always about variegation, but may produce some very nice colour in the end. This is a nice species that's growing here at the moment. And it's got quite a few crosses in it. So it's been done multiple times. Parents back on themselves or you know, several generations later. So to produce these seedlings, it's actually probably taken more like closer to the 10-year mark to get these ones, because that's a very complicated grex that's being created. These Neoregelia are now ready to move. They're being put into their pots. They've been growing really well. They've been potted up about 6 months or so ago, and from that little tiny stage to this stage now. And so now all they need is additional fertilizer. So some slow release fertilizer into them, and then pop them over into a more sunny position for them to grow, and then wait to see how they progress and still cull from this grex. So this grex itself, as you can see, there is just 12 or so left over. The rest were discarded. Out of this 12, there may only be 3 or 4 that are actually kept in the end. So we collect seed, we hybridize our plants, and then we collect the seed from them. This one here is an Ecmia, and it's a USA clone of Blanchettiana. And this is where you find your seeds. They're hidden underneath these little bracts. So you need to unfold them to find your little swollen seeds beneath them, and then feeling them when they're soft and they've changed colour, you'll know that they're ripe. And they always ripen from the bottom up because that's the same way they flower, as is the case here. The flower occurs progressively up and open, so the seeds will ripen from the bottom up. So you've just got to come along and collect them. Alcantarias take a lot longer. By the time we hybridize, this is a big flower head. By the time we hybridize and pollinate all of these seeds, flower heads here, and they produce seeds, that's a further 9 months away. And then we need to collect all of the seed, and then we need to grow it. Then we need to wait for those plants to mature, and in Alcantaria, that's 10 to 20 years. Make sure that they produce pups and that they're stable, and then after that period of time, we can then select and name. There'll be a lot of culling because there's a lot of seed in this particular seed head. Now, it doesn't all need to go down at the same time. We can do these in batches, save our seed by popping it in the refrigerator in a sealed container, and then we can reuse the seed repeatedly. So this is already a hybrid that was created using odorata and another one which was Glasuriana. So I ended up with these long thin curl bracts, the same as you would see with an odorata, and also the flower head of it had the pink bracts from its parent as well. So we ended up with that hybrid. It's very sun tolerant. Now I kept the seed and repeated the sowing again, and once again you can see a very nice thin leaf curled odorata form. But I know that this one's going to have, again, the pink brack, huge head on it that it does for an odorata type. Takes full sun, and it's this beautiful shade of blue. So a cross between both its parents of odorata and also Glasuriana. So a very tough plant. This was the second planting, so I repeated it. So you can repeat the sowing several times over several periods. The plants themselves are still the same Grex name, however, because they've got the same parentage. However, each plant is given an individual name when we come to naming them. So this plant has a different name to the other plant, and the pups from this one will be, again, a different name. They're the same name as this parent, but they won't be the same name as the other one that's already flowered, if that makes sense. Now, hunting for seed. Now, this particular plant, which is Flaming Tiger, this particular plant has beautiful variegated bract seed heads here, and lovely fat seeds developing in it. The problem with this, however, is it's a margineted plant, which means if I was to put this seed down, I will get, no doubt, 99.9% albino. So unfortunately, none of that seed would be viable to use. Any plants that have got these white edges will produce albino babies. So the aim is to use the pollen from this plant instead when we're doing it, and put this pollen back on a non-variegated plant in order to produce a variegated plant. All right, so several years later, what we end up with is a wide variety of different plants, different colorations, different sizes, different shapes, different flowers, and each of these are from several different Grexes. They've been culled dramatically, and this is what we've ended up with after doing several years' work already. Now, I wanted a really big red Bilberger, something very striking. So I did a hybridizing of a plant 3 years ago and ended up with this monster. Now, it's got beautiful spots on it. It is a lovely pink colour and the sun shines through. This is one that I have kept and named. It stands about 70 centimetres tall. It's a big, it won't even stand up, in fact. It's producing pups as well now, so it's going to flower. Sorry about the camera. Now, in the same Grex was a white version or a green and white version. Same height, lovely big plant, mottled, green, again, several years of work. So we're up to about year 4 now, and I'm still waiting on this one to flower. So a lot of work goes into producing our plants. So that's the two of them side by side, one red, one white, both the same Grex, both have the same parents, but are completely different. Same Grex, but a lovely mulberry colour instead. Lovely big one, chunky one, not quite as tall as the first one. This one's called Stormy Comet, just waiting on it to flower now. Because it has a pup there, so it's doing really well. So all I've got to do now is cut between those two pups and get even more pups. So you need to have enough pups or enough to reproduce when it comes to registering your plant. You can't register a single plant because what happens to it. Now I've also got minis, my little mini ones here as well, which don't grow much larger than 5 to 10 centimetres. And then I've got my Neoregelias that were done 4 years ago now. And this is a Grex of lots of different colour variations that still needs to be culled. So some will be kept and selected and grown on. And these ones, for example, will be kept. And then so these guys need to produce some pups. This is years of work to get to here. Same going here. Sorry, there goes my voice. Same going here. This little one and this little one are from the same Grex again. Nice mulberry purple pink colours. Both of them different. One's tinky, one's winky. And both of them are now, they're a smaller bilbergia, and one's an open vase and one's much more tighter. Both of those will be waiting for flowers and pups for registration purposes. Some lovely others that are here that are in a different Grex as well. So that's how we go about growing on our plants. Lots of culling. There'll be some culling even in this lot still. There are some really nice pink ones in amongst the batch, and then some not so great plants as well. A little bit more boring or very similar to what other plants look like. So the aim is to produce something that's very different, not the same. Okay, so that pink one's quite a nice one in the Grex. It's got a little pup as well. So this guy here is probably going to flower now. So this is a Neoregelia flower head that I've taken out so that I can go through it layer by layer, searching for seeds that are viable. You're looking for large, round, swollen seed heads that contain dark seeds that are ready and mature. So this head's been removed so that I can go through and check it, because this one was all hand pollinated. So I've got a little bit of work to do in a moment, but I'm still potting up seedlings though at this stage. So for members wanting to get seed, we can either go into our own gardens and go through our plants and perhaps find seeds that have been hybridized naturally or have self-pollinated themselves. The other option is making our own seeds by pollinating our plants ourselves to give them an extra chance to produce seeds. This is done at different times during the day. The pollen needs to be mobile, so it comes off quite easily, and then it's transmitted to the female receptive part. It then travels down to the ovum of the plant, where it then will mature and produce seed. In a bilbergia, that will take a couple of weeks, around about 6-8 weeks, and checking your plants, looking for swollen buds at the bottom, and you'll be able to tell. Now, each of these has been self-pollinated, so what I'll do is I'll pop a tag in this pot and write self on it, so that I know that the seeds that have been produced from that one have been self-pollinated. So once again, members, it's very important that we tag all of our plants and that we keep really good records of them. Anybody that is buying seedlings from growers, ensuring that you've got all the details, so that if later on you are going to register the plant, you've got all the details of the particular hybrids, and it makes it a lot easier when it comes time to register anything. the BCR registration page. So that's Bromeliad Cultivar Register, is where all the hybrids that are registered are located. So you can search that database and find plants that have been registered in the past. There's quite a few that I still need to pluck out and pop into pots. All right, that's the end of the video for the day. So happy gardening, everybody. Those of you who are hybridizing, any questions, you're welcome to pop into the comment section, and any hybridizer or grower will be happy to answer your questions. This is another batch of Neoregelias as well that also have been done quite some time ago. So it is a big, long process to create a new hybrid. Lots of work involved, lots of hours to produce these new hybrids. Yeah, there's one there in flower again. This is another one of mine. This is Eddie. Lovely plant that's been registered already. This is the next generation back in flower again. So I did this one, I don't know, 8 years ago maybe, originally I did it. All right, better get back to potting those seedlings up, folks. All right, happy gardening, everybody. Bye now. And just finally, this is the Neoregelia that was done 5 years ago. It's lovely, isn't it? This one needs a name. It looks very similar to Shell Dance, but it doesn't have the curls. It is a Neoregelia. So I just need to give this one a name. It's almost mature, so it's a midi. I'm just waiting for pups from this one, and then it'll go off to be registered as well. So it was first planted back in 2018, this one. So that's 5 years ago, and it's still not quite fully grown. Okay, now it's happy gardening. Bye now.